Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid Part 2. Joining me today is...
For fun.
And a geek for evil.
Yay! So last week we had just an absolute blast talking about the infamous Green Lantern comic in which Hal Jordan began a relationship with a 13-year-old. And I decided, no, we can't just drag Green Lantern's good name through the mud just because he slept with one 13-year-old. So we need to drag other characters through the mud and talk about just infamously, not even necessarily bad, but just infamous fucking comics that have baffling decisions made in them. And Alfie was like, oh yeah, I'm on board. And he knew instantly what he wanted to talk about. And we wanted to make sure it was okay with Steve. And Steve was like, oh, absolutely, I'm on board. So we're starting this series of infamous comic reviews, I'm going to call it. We're continuing this series by looking at what book that you were just so instantly ready to talk about, Alfie.
Yeah, and that is probably the book that came to mind of anyone who has read enough issues of Amazing Spider-Man, Sins Past. And for those who aren't familiar with the title, I'm sure basically anyone on the internet by now will be familiar with the premise. This is the one where not Mary Jane, that would be a different story. This is the one where Gwen Stacy is revealed to have had secret children with Norman Osborn. And that panel that if you post any Spider-Man related opinion will be posted as a reply under it by someone eventually.
And what was so funny about this is I kind of waited till last night to read the book, which still in terms of Ian preparation is pretty good, I think. So I'm reading it last night, and I purposely left my phone downstairs so it wouldn't distract me while I'm reading. And then I finish it, I come downstairs, and I check my phone, and there's a comment on an old episode of Geeky Gentlemen where we reviewed the War Crimes book. It's this really fucking long, rambling comment, but right at the end of it, posted literally while I was reading the book, because it was 2 hours ago by the time I checked my phone, right at the end of it, it's this book was character assassination, even worse than Sins Past was for Gwen Stacy and Mary Jane. And I'm just the fucking timing of that was so goddamn funny to me. Because no, I'd never read this. I'd heard about it, but Alfie and I were talking about this kind of last week off episode, I think, where it was I'd heard about it, but I'd always assumed it was some wacky shit that happened back in the 70s or 80s. And Alfie's like, no, this was 2004. And I'm like, what the fuck? That still kind of throws me. So that being said, I think the thing that surprised me as I began reading this, and the thing that kind of filled me with the most questions, because we had a bit of a similar thing with the reveal of who was the writer for the Green Lantern Corps story as Steve Englehart, who's pretty, I don't know if well known is the right term, but I also wouldn't go with prestigious.
No, he's prestigious. He's one of the most important Batman writers of all time.
Okay, I don't know.
He's prestigious.
If you
you're talking about you're talking about the most important Captain America and one of the most important Batman stories back to back. He's pretty prestigious.
Okay, fair enough. And then arguably the most important Green Lantern story. So it's kind of funny, like Englehart writing this really infamous Green Lantern story, and then we go right into JMS writing this really fucking like infamous Spider-Man story, and I'd like honestly I'd only ever heard positive things about his run. I guess with this exception. So that was quite that one threw me quite a bit. That one threw me for a loop. Not gonna lie.
Yeah,
So I guess my first question is: was this like an editorial mandate, and he just made it work best he could, or was this fully his creative decision?
so I think this is a case where the editorial meddling behind the scenes is kind of intrinsic to the discussion of this book, and is kind of because you've also, Ian, heard of another bad story by this very good writer who writes a perfect Peter Parker, is he also later after this goes on to write One More Day, which again leaves you in a very funny situation whenever you're a Spider-Man fan and are recommending people to read modern Spider-Man comics, because the perfect jumping on point is JMS. And like his opening arc and everything, right? And then you have to preface to them. It's so funny. You have to press. It's the only run in comics where you have to do this. You may want to stop here and not continue the rest of the entire run, because it's so funny. Because like the character's voice never gets bad. JMS, even in this story, I think writes an excellent Peter Parker in terms of his reactions and how he handles things, and just in all of those things. I think if you're looking like a definitive this guy gets it of the character, I think JMS is definitely at least in the top three. But it becomes an issue when no matter how good a writer is and no matter how much star power a writer has, the fact that when this book came out, it was one of the most high-selling comic books of its era. Like, there's a reason why in like the trade paperback for this, you've got Kevin Feige talking about, oh, I love that this run was coming out, I was picking it up, because JMS on Spider-Man was like a huge deal. It was something that was actually, we're bringing in someone who has credits outside of comic books, which is kind of what Marvel in the 2000s was all about, with Whedon and Kevin Smith, etc. Like Quesada was really into bringing in people who had more of like an industry role, small as it may be for someone like JMS. It was still like kind of like new life into the book. So his original pitch for this was he wanted to do a story where, and for anyone who hasn't read it, this will be going into spoilers like immediately off the bat, but I'm sure people know like the most of these details. Yeah, since class will be spoiled. Oh no! The original pitch was that Gwen Stacy was going to be revealed to have been pregnant and have children who have been aged up to come back and kill Peter. But the idea was they would be Peter's children. That these would be children that he had with Gwen in secret. She goes back to Europe and stuff. The spider powers still cause like the age up, and Norman would still twist them against their father as a way of kind of like gaining revenge. Was the basic premise of this. Is why even in the art, if you look at the son, he doesn't look a lot like Norman. He's pretty much one-to-one with how Peter looks. Then Marvel was like, no, we don't want Peter Parker to have children. That ages him up. Even though explicitly in the story there is a built-in reason for why they are aged up, and it doesn't have to age up Peter. They're saying this will age the character, this will do this thing, and you will only accept this if you make it someone else's children that isn't Peter. And I think it went as so far as to, it was Quesada specifically who brought up Norman. I don't know if that's specifically for sure, but it was the general pitch of like Norman would be the more obvious choice for these kind of things somehow. Now, the sensible thing to do in this situation is to just throw away the pitch and be like, all right, I can't do the story I want. It probably wasn't the strongest pitch in the world to begin with. Let's just move on. But for some reason, JMS really just felt he had to tell a story about aged up twins coming. So he said, all right, let's just roll with it and pretend that Norman Osborn sleeping with Gwen Stacy is cool, I guess. So like that's how we end up with this, and that's how we end up with a lot of the decisions in this book, and how a lot of this book feels like there's interesting concepts and themes being talked about on one hand, and on the other hand, it's the most comic book convoluted nonsense you've ever seen in your life. Like, it just, Steve messaged me about this a little bit earlier, so I'm curious about your thoughts. But it's just, this is a very distinctly like 2000s Marvel comic, and like how some of that energy is really, really bad. But then when we look about how we deal with the consequences of this in the future, there's actually a lot of good stuff that actually is lost from something even as infamous as this.
Steve?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, to follow that up, Nick Spencer's run on Amazing was touted for a really long time as, if he does nothing else, at the very least, he'll bring back the marriage. He'll undo one more day. And then that never ended up happening. And like the big thing he left for Spider-Man's legacy is at the tail end of his run, he retconned Sins Past. So it turned out that no, actually, he didn't sleep with Gwen Stacy. It was all Harry's plan to make Norman lose his mind and attack Peter or some bullshit. So putting it in that context, I was telling Alfie this. I feel like Sins Past is not. I want to be really clear about this. Sins Past is not a good story, but it's not that bad. And when you put it in comparison to what Nick Spencer does later, the retcon of the story almost makes the story worse than it is on its own merits, because the retcon on its own is so convoluted that at a certain point, like, if you're looking at this historically now, right? This book came out in 2004. It's 2023. This book is 19 years old. It's a little bit like the Jason Todd thing I always mention, which is like, when it happened, people were angry. But at some point, the character has had the status quo for so long that you can't pretend like it was a fluke that you can just retcon away, and you have to deal with it as like an established part of that mythos on a certain level, and retconning it just feels kind of lazy. And I feel like that's what ended up happening with Nick Spencer, where like we were so annoyed at the existence of this story for so long, for this one little element about it, that progressively we decided we could never move forward with anything with the character, and we just kept trying to backpedal choices that we disagreed with, to the point where Spider-Man got caught in a vicious cycle of bad decision, retcon, bad decision, retcon, bad decision, over and over and over again, and that's why the book has been so bad for so long. But reading this in context and liking JMS's run is where I started reading Spider-Man comics before I went backwards. So I really enjoy a lot of the stuff he does, even after Sins Past. Like, I think Back in Black is really good, and that's after this. But this story on its own merits, people don't like the fact that this implies that Norman and Gwen slept together. But honestly, I kind of like where a lot of that stuff goes. I think the biggest problem with it is just the twins. If it wasn't the twins, it would actually be a really interesting, compelling romance drama. It's really just the cloned, aged-up twins that put a wrench in the whole thing for me.
I mean, that's funny you say that, because they were the characters I liked in this. I didn't really care for... I guess I won't say I didn't care for the stuff with MJ, but it, like, at a certain point, she felt like she was being too good of a wife. It's like that we could talk about that more, but like, I generally liked a lot of the twin stuff of the, like, I look just like my mother, don't I? Gabe always says that I do. That kind of hit for me when you get, like, the reveal of her without the mask. I like that. Legitimately, I wasn't quite prepared for it, even though they set it up, like, pretty obviously this is going to happen, but just when it hits quick. I was expecting it to, like, linger for a bit longer, but when the fucking Gray Goblin, or whatever you want to call him, like, comes through that hospital window, I don't know, man, there was something to it. Like, Peter was vulnerable as shit. That was kind of fucking hype. I quite enjoyed that bit. And just the sense of, like, Gabe just can't admit to himself that Peter's, like, talking and making some sense, and just everything Peter's doing, he's trying his best in just, like, a terrible situation. The the like twists and turns of drama of the, you know, we can kill them whenever we want to, of Peter receiving these, you know, really threatening things in the mail, Peter working with the police in a really haphazard way. I quite liked a lot of that. The thing for me, and I think we can all admit that the conceit to get us there is the biggest problem of the Gwen Stacy sleeping with Norman is just like the most what the fuck kind of thing. The thing for me that bothered me about it the most is not the idea of her doing that, because fuck it, young impressionable high school girl and middle-aged man. I mean, I'm certain I've read a comic. Yeah, I'm certain I've read a comic recently that make that seem perfectly logical. But no, like high school girl, rich middle-aged guy, influential, scientific, showing interest in her. I could believe it. The thing that bothered me about it is when like they're talking, when Mary Jane is talking to Gwen about it, her reasoning is just the most like generic, like believable bullshit, because she's just immediately off him, and it's just I just don't fucking buy that she ever would have felt the way to go after him or to enter any kind of relationship with him. My problem with this really came down to the fact that like it feels like Gwen had no agency in this story, which makes the reveal all the worse. And like maybe if she had actually been further developed with it, maybe if they had spent more time in the flashbacks, not just repeating literally the same panels, but actually developing what their relationship was, why she felt comfortable sleeping with Norman in the first place, I might have liked it and been willing to give it a little bit more rope. Like I can still see why people would read that and think of it as like sacrilege, as like spitting on a character's legacy, all those things, and I don't think you can really argue with that.
I'll argue with that when you're done, but yes, continue.
Well, like, I don't think you could argue with that just simply because it is on a personal level of how you feel about how you come away from something. So that's like a hard thing because that's just a very personal thing. But that would be a more intelligible story. Like, if you could actually show a character-based reason behind it outside of 2 sentences of, oh, he just had this magnetism and this vulnerability, but power. It's just the most generic fucking thing of like, well, I just need an excuse and I don't want to spend time on it. Well, then maybe you shouldn't be doing it. If it doesn't seem like it's believable for the character and you can't write a believable scenario on page and you're just going to leave it up to the reader's imagination, I don't think you can really get mad when the reader goes, well, this is just fucking stupid because I cannot honestly imagine this happening with the character that I read and that I knew. So that's kind of my thing. Go ahead. Tell me why I'm wrong and why Norman X Gwen is the best ship ever.
No,
Steve.
I
know that's
basically
you.
agree with everything that you're saying here, right? Like, funny enough, JMS's original pitch that Alfie mentioned of, like, Peter has kids that have now aged up and are trying to kill him is a lot weaker than the editorial mandate idea that Gwen sleeps with Norman Osborn, to be completely honest. Because one is just kind of kooky science fiction clone saga nonsense, and the other is like actual compelling romance drama, which is what a lot of the best Spider-Man comics are. The biggest problem with this book is not that Gwen sleeps with Norman. It's that there's no development or conversation about what that relationship was like or why it happens, or like you said, any sort of agency for who Gwen is. The fact that it's all done as an after-the-fact reveal to discuss how Peter feels about it is the biggest problem with the concept, not the concept on its own. And I will fight tooth and nail all day against people who are like, character assassination, this story is bad because it ruined this character, because I don't think any of that bullshit ever matters for anything. If a writer wants to tell a story and use the characters as tools to execute that story, it doesn't fucking matter what you thought that character was, because this other person thinks it's different. If your view and personal relationship with the character should be respected, then why shouldn't the writers? All of that is bullshit to me. I don't care that you think Heroes in Crisis ruined Wally West. at the end of the day, these are entirely fictional people, and they will do entirely what the writers and artists decide they want them to do. So if you're mad that Gwen made this choice, you should be happy because she's not real, and she didn't actually make a choice. The writer did, and that's what all fiction is. So none of that bothers me, and none of it ever really has bothered me. The thing that bothers me about the story is just that there's really not a lot of drama in here with a concept that feels like it should be loaded with a lot of drama. My favorite bit of this is the Peter MJ stuff, because I feel like there's a really interesting tension between Peter and MJ that's always there in the best versions of their relationship, where if you go back to like classic Stanley, Jack Kirby, all the way up through Jerry Conway Spider-Man comics, the idea is sort of that like Gwen Stacy was Peter's perfect girl. That Gwen Stacy was like your ideal version of who you were going to love for the rest of your life. That was his soulmate, and then she died. And MJ replaced her. And it's not that MJ is bad, and it's not that the relationship is bad, but there is a difference there of like MJ is never going to be Gwen Stacy, and that's why he carries the guilt with him for the rest of his life, because at the end of the day, he loved Gwen in a way he's never going to love MJ. And there's a beautiful story in there of like how do you move on from that and accept where you are and treat people in a way that accepts them for who they are and not who they're not. And a lot of the tension in MJ and Peter's relationship is when Peter isn't able to do that and MJ picks up on it. And I really like this idea that the way this book oscillates between Peter and MJ, where she is being really, really understanding, but there's always like these small beats where like she recognizes this is probably not the greatest thing in the world. I love the bit at the end where Peter's hallucinating saying "I love you" to Gwen, and then MJ responds as if she's saying it to her. But then throughout the book, the part even when like he's when she like wakes up in the middle of the night and he wakes her up and like offers to make her breakfast, and they have that interaction about like, and every time you do this, it's because you have to leave. I feel like their relationship, and specifically the strain on their relationship, and the amount of strain that this kind of reveal that she knew the whole time would put on it, is all really, really ripe with really interesting character drama, and I love all that. And I also love the idea that there's even like a sense of like a love triangle there between him, Gwen, and MJ, where like that relationship of loyalty to your friends,
a love rectangle.
That love triangle, I feel like is honestly kind of interesting, and I feel like the repeating panels going back to that flashback with Norman, I thought that stuff is actually really good for setting up the idea that like this story is being told from multiple perspectives, and every time you flash back to it, you're adding a beat of context from a different side of that story. The biggest problem is just the most important side of that story is Gwen's side of the story, which everything about this comes secondhand. The famous panel of Norman and Gwen having sex, that's not like a flashback to that event. That's in the context of the story. That's drawn as if Peter is imagining what happened. It's not actually shown in a literal way. Everything we hear about their conversation is what MJ overhears from their office. There's no moment in the story where you cut back to not necessarily an objective observer, but someone that has a better first-hand account of events that kind of allows it to be contextualized. And without that, it really suffers. It's not the choice. It's just the fact that you could have handled this more delicately, where you allow the character to have an opinion about it and you just kind of sidestep that.
Yeah. It's interesting because you mentioned the MJ thing, particularly the panel of Peter saying "I love you" to Gwen in his memory, and MJ thinks it's he's saying it to her. Because that was the thing that, like, I like that in some contexts, and then kind of the way that some of the story makes it feel kind of gross. And I'm not sure what my ultimate takeaway from it is, because like you sound like you're quite approving of that and you like those elements, Steve, and I would tend to agree with you if not for the fact that it's the part that makes me feel like gross about it is to do with the way that Gwen is so stepped on in this story. The fact that like her agency as a character feels very taken away from a story that is revolving around and quite radically changing the history around her. So I feel like that's the kind of cardinal sin of the thing of, you know, if you're going to touch this, like, you know, very important in the lore of Spider-Man character, that people have such a strong memory and viewpoint of that, like, just historical importance of Gwen to take into consideration too. Her death is the end of an era of comic books for a lot of people. So if you're going to go back and touch that, and you're going to rob that character of agency and make her do something that feels out of character for the story and not even bother to really give it the kind of time a decision like that deserves. Like, even if you don't like it at the end, I think we can all agree it needed more time devoted to it. So if you're not going to do that, then you're going to kind of put things in this weird place where you're basically implying that Peter actually doesn't love MJ. He just loves Gwen, and all of those feelings are just kind of being transposed onto MJ. MJ's his plan B. MJ's not really the one for him, which is an interesting enough idea. But again, it just leaves me with this very, like, uneasy feeling given the way that Gwen is treated as a character here. I would trust that more if Gwen felt like a more complete character, because the result it leaves me with is that Mary Jane, by extension, feels like a less complete character. Since the writer has lost trust in me for the way he's treated Gwen, I've lost trust in the way that I feel he's going to treat Mary Jane as a character. Alfie, you've been quiet for too long. Come in and talk here.
Okay, you two are kind of going back and forth with that. So, my main thing, because you both talked about a lot, I want to just provide, I guess, the Spider-Man reading context behind some of these decisions, because I think it's actually quite important to a lot of what you have been talking about, and would have been easy to mine to make this a more compelling story.
Can I ask you a question about the context real fast, too?
Shoot, go ahead.
Okay, cool. So just two things that I don't know off the top of my head. Do the twins ever come back?
Yes.
All I know... They do, okay. Because all I know about it is that it gets retconned with Nick Spencer later, but I'm not sure if he addresses that part. But then the other thing is, this is a few years before One More Day. Remind me if the way Peter's relationship to MJ is handled here plays into the run going into One More Day or not, or if it just kind of gets sideswept.
Not at all. It's the Gwen from, like, previously to this, and then after this will get, like, a scant mention, but to kind of the point Ian was talking about, or even what you were saying about how, like, this kind of, there's an interpretation of this book that you can frame it as Gwen being, like, Peter's soulmate and stuff. The rest of the JMS run is 100% die-hard. Mary Jane is his soulmate. She is his true love. Everything else is, like, even One More Day, as much as that is a book about, like, dismantling the marriage and stuff, has some of, like, the most, like, the end of One More Day is Peter and Mary Jane holding each other, and Mary Jane being like, our love is gonna beat this. We're so in love with each other, even the devil can't stop us. And Peter agrees, and they just hold each other, which is, like, really, really sad looking at the books right now, because it feels like damn, love just doesn't mean shit to Marvel, huh? Like, it's actually really extremely tragic. But no, the only mention Gwen gets prior to this is when Peter gets there's, like, the story where he happens to get, like, a lot of money from like a mob boss, like, wired to him that he can't refuse. So what he decides to use instead is he donates it to a charity and creates, like, a Gwen Stacy memorial library. That's the only, so just so he can be free of all the cash and put it to a good cause. But that's the only mention Gwen gets prior to this, and then after that is just stuff like that. It's never in as much of a detail and as much of hype as it is with specifically this.
Yeah, because that really defends what Ian was saying there, where, like, I really like the uneasiness of the relationship of, like, Peter is kind of scummy for loving Gwen into her death to the point where he's disregarding MJ. But if that's the basis of a love triangle, it's really fascinating. And the fact that it doesn't actually go anywhere with that makes it a lot worse. But anyway, sorry, continue.
No, you're completely fine.
Again, that was kind of what I was getting at, of, like, MJ feels like almost too good a wife in
yeah,
this.
Exactly. Yeah, no, you're 100% right, especially given that the book never follows up on it.
Okay. Go ahead, Alfie. Go ahead.
problem. The other thing to talk with the Mary Jane specifically thing is because I wanted to get, because for the subject matter of this issue, and I think because when Spider-Man fans specifically talk about this and anything relating to female characters, they whip out their favorite character, Misogyny Man, and he really goes to town on a lot of things with this. So I wanted to get some females' perspectives on a lot of these issues and thing. And the thing you mentioned with Mary Jane being too good of a wife is what Erin brought up, and just like the dialogue of there is this kind of unspoken, the girl you kind of hate the most will keep your secrets sometime aspect to a lot of this. But at the same time, she says she found it really hard to believe that it would have never come up before, is especially during, if you look through the history of Spider-Man, of just Peter being a dickhead to her and like fucking her over and bringing up the memory of Gwen quite a lot, like Steve is talking about. There's plenty of opportunities you can lead to where, like, well, if Mary Jane had this smoking gun waiting, like, well, at least I didn't fuck the Green Goblin, you know, like right, that's kind of a crazy ass like bombshell you can drop, which obviously, again, retcons are gonna retcon, so you can't engage with things like that. And there have been other posts.
It's so funny.
It is, right? Like that's what Kevin Smith would have wrote.
It just reminds me of this fucking stand-up comic one time. It was like, I could never be a superhero. I'd be like in an argument with some girl, she'd be leaving, and I'd be like, bitch, I'm Batman.
So the other thing with that is, on a more charitable excuse, there's this Spider-Man Tumblr archive called Train Cat, who she does a lot of interesting like retrospectives on Spider-Man history, and she brought up something relating to this where the act of it feels a lot closer to sharing non-consensual experiences with like a girl and making sure that she will keep that secret for you. And specifically, you two were talking about how like vague and generic the scene when Gwen talks about this can come off. Her interpretation of that is that the way that is written is something that, because Gwen doesn't seem too sure of how that happened itself, it's not written as out and out non-consensual, but in kind of what we were talking about earlier of, this isn't as simple as, oh, Gwen's like a villain here or she betrayed Peter. It is closer to, this is a 19-year-old girl who has very deliberately been preyed upon by an older, wealthier man, who then goes around and kills her for her children, which is like, well, that's just about any political senator in America does shit like that on the daily. So, like, this is not exactly a far-fetched concept in terms of stuff like this actually happening. So,
that would be one where I'm like, I would be okay with that if that was in the story, but I feel like that's stretching so far and, like, so heavy that I don't think you can just give it that. If it's not, like, with certain subject matter, particularly like non-consensual actions and stuff like that, my kind of default is, if it's not specifically mentioned in the story, then it's probably unfair to assume that. Because if a writer wants to put that in, they will usually be very direct with it.
Right.
That's just kind of my interpretation on that, though. Because that sounds like it's trying to justify it. I'm like, I don't know if I'd agree with that one.
I think these are just things I wanted to present because I think a lot of this conversation can get like very like male talk dominated. So I want to give perspectives from that aspect. To go back to what I was saying before about the context of this and how you could have got something a little bit more interesting, there's a very specific time period this book chooses to take place in, where this is after the death of Captain Stacy, where Gwen is very, very in I hate Spider-Man mode. I want Spider-Man dead. Like, she's very much characterized in those books as like actively, not just like I dislike him. Like, she hates Spider-Man more than Jonah in those issues. Like, she is fully, that's like where the conflict with the relationship comes up to, and she's very distraught and in a place of like vulnerability. At the same time, Norman is regaining his memories from like an incident where he had a battle with Spider-Man. He doesn't know he's the Green Goblin at this time. He's kind of just in a fugue state. Harry's taking drugs and falling into this. So the cast is very like scrambled and disoriented. And something with that this book never brings up, which is if you're going to do this story, and what I think is like a key failing of JMS with this book, is if he didn't want to do his original pitch and he didn't believe in the story that he's telling here with this one, and he wasn't going to give it the time and development it needed to make it work, you shouldn't have done the fucking story, because then it makes all of this feel like any potential that was there to do something interesting is just completely squandered. Because if you had actually pitched this right, if you were actually going to do Norman Osborn with Gwen Stacy and make a story about that, the first thing you do is look at their interactions in the book. Oh, I had no idea that Captain Stacy and Norman Osborn were like best friends. That's never brought up in this entire book. If you go to those original issues, Norman Osborn actually comes in and saves Stacy and Gwen Stacy from a villain. And there's an issue where I think JMS talked about that this is kind of where he imagined this happened, where Gwen goes back to thank Norman for doing that. And, like, all of that stuff is in the original run by Lee and Ramita, and none of it is brought up because JMS clearly had no interest in exploring these themes, had no interest in exploring his ideas. He was kind of just wanting to do his story and forcing it, and then the Norman thing is very much here as just like an afterthought. And it's...
Well, see...
Go ahead with Steve.
No, sorry. I was just going to say, then see, that's my whole thing is like, I disagree with this idea that this is a bad premise because I don't think it's a bad premise. And I think that's case in point for why it's not, because you go back to those original issues, there's a precedent for it, and that's fine on one end. But more than that, the idea that there is a point in the status quo you can use where Harry's on drugs, Norm's in a fugue state, Gwen hates Spider-Man, Peter is always just being fucking Peter and juggling all of this nonsense. And you get this context of a girl going away to college, 19 years old, and knows her dad's friend who is wealthy and charming on a certain level. And there is this kind of story of what is that relationship and what is the dynamic and what level of consent versus coercion is happening here. Like that's legitimately a story. That's legitimately like a fucking daytime drama right there. And the fact that that's not the meat of the story is its biggest failing. It's not the choice itself. It's the fact that the whole story isn't that choice.
I'd 100% agree with that. I think that is a perfectly fair assessment of like, it's not that this doesn't work because it's like cursed or like completely should not have been touched, which is I think what you could say about the like Hal Aresia thing from the Green Lantern Corps of like, no, you just shouldn't have fucking done that. That was just a bad concept. Is no, like Gwen's a character, she can make mistakes, she can have faults, and if you want her to have a relationship with Norman, there's nothing that says that's not doable. Or if you want to, do like a non-consensual one, again, much more sensitive topic, you should probably not just be making that decision, especially as a man, just willy-nilly. Should definitely be talking that over with some people, hopefully some female feedback. But like it's certainly a choice that you could make, and as Alfie said, there is some precedent to kind of see where that could come from within the canon. You could maybe do something where she's like looking up to Norman, and then Norman's starting to take advantage and press advantage of that, and that leads to her getting pregnant through like either dubious consensual sex or straight up non-consensual, and that could be perfectly interesting, and make for a compelling story. Again, I'd still see that people would be very turned off by it, and if that's your relationship with the character, you're certainly welcome to feel that way, but I'm not going to say that it's a bad story out the gate on that. There is potential there. There's potential in doing anything. You can make anything work as long as you can make it work. This just doesn't bother. And that's kind of the problem that I had with the flashback, Steve. What you were talking about earlier of like, oh, going back to the same scene and seeing it from all these different perspectives. Yeah, that is cool. But it feels wasted when there's just such an obvious fucking gap existing here. So we've been talking almost exclusively about the... We've talked a little bit about the MJ stuff, but we've almost exclusively been on the Gwen and Norman thing, which is totally fair. It's the thing that made the comic famous. But I think that we're kind of going around in circles at this point. I think we're making the same point like 2 or 3 different ways. So I want to transition off now and talk about some of the other stuff in the book. So
before you do that, man,
yeah, sure.
Yeah, I've got to bounce. To continue with the rest of the episode, just want to say as a final thing before I have to go, it's very weird and kind of disingenuous considering his original pitch, how hard JMS tries to paint Peter Parker was a virgin in those early issues this entire and make it a plot point. Because, like, even before Gwen shows up, you read those Betty Brad issues, this man was not a virgin by any way, shape, or form. He absolutely, like, we've all read Sin's Past, yes, but we've all read Spider-Man Blue here. Why are they so obsessed with his sex lives? Why does she have to also, in addition to all of this, have to be virginal? Like, Christ, guys, did you have to add that extra thing? So just, that's an extra thing it's funny, so it's silly, but like, point that out and like, why, if you read those books, that is absolutely untrue. Stan Lee is a very horny writer, and he would like absolutely make sure that Romita was drawing those girls in a way that, yes, every character in those books were fucking each other. That's like inarguable.
There's a lot of like.
Bye, guys. I'll leave it on that note.
All right.
Okay, see you, man.
There's a lot of like implied and interesting critique of the story when it comes to like how misogynistic it is or isn't. And again, I think a lot of that rests on the keyword there of like implied. The fact that Gwen and Peter's conflict here rests entirely on the fact, or not entirely, but a lot on the fact that she was a virgin is maybe the most directly misogynist thing about it, though.
I mean, I think it's weird that like. I guess I didn't get the impression that Gwen was a virgin up until that point.
The fact that he
cares,
that's the problem.
Yeah.
The fact
I just got the impression that Peter was. I just got the impression Peter was. I didn't get the impression Gwen was.
It's a very strange scene in general. But the thing on that train of thought while we're here, because you're right, you can make anything work as long as you make it work. However, Spider-Man has had a long and sordid history with clones and otherwise weird genetically enhanced beings and such. And man, I really do not like the twins. I think the twins are maybe the thing about the book I like the least.
See, I like them perfectly fine. Just the way they went about attacking him, that they go for Peter first and foremost, and then like kind of luckily find out he is Spider-Man along the way. Really early on too. I thought that was kind of cool. I liked that aspect. And again, just, man, there was just something so cool about fucking Grey Goblin. I was fucking there for that shit, dude. That was, like, I liked that fight a lot. It was short and sweet, but, like, holy shit, he felt so vulnerable in that moment of, like, no, this is just how Peter Parker dies. I've not read this comic before. He probably comes back, but this is clearly how Peter Parker dies, right? It's just, holy shit, that was, like, such a good fucking last-minute horror movie jump scare payoff kind of moment of Grey Goblin coming through the fucking hospital window and just ripping him out of there. And it's, like, it's such a surprisingly even matchup because Gabe had already kind of caused Peter a lot of problems up to that point in the story, just one-on-one, or well, two-on-one, without being like souped up and having like crazy goblin tech, and just like going into it and knowing like Peter's super injured, but Gabe's also very new to this, just so like he's falling for stuff that Norman or Hobgoblin or whatever wouldn't. I don't know, man, I was fucking there for that. That shit was so cool. I loved that fucking fight at the end.
I really like the fight at the end too. I like the whole he falls underneath the bridge and accidentally discovers the old goblin hideout. That was really fucking cool to me. funny enough, that location gets a lot of adaptations, and it was in the animated series in the 90s, which is part of why I like it so much, because it just feels like a cheesy cartoon idea. But I like that bit. I like the design of Grey Goblin a lot.
Oh yeah, he's
it-
scary looking. It's good.
He's probably the scariest a goblin's look since like classic Green Goblin, honestly. Like, he's legitimately kind of terrifying. I love it. My biggest thing is just like, early on in the story, the idea that they want to ruin Peter's life and they discover he's Spider-Man along the ways is interesting enough. I feel like there's just a little bit too much of Marvel early 2000s decompression happening with them. And you have like this weird sort of like early 2000s, they look like they're in like fucking SWAT team gear, wearing all leather black outfits, and like having that sort of born idea of like, we know what you did kind of thing, where the conceit for all of that just kind of really bored me. And I didn't really start like vibing with the story until after we got to the other half of the Stacy letter and realized, oh, she was pregnant, oh, MJ knew about it, like all that stuff in the middle where Peter's brain is starting to get broken by all the revelations is where the meat of it really felt for me. And all of the impetus to get there with the twins trying to systematically ruin Peter's life, I felt kind of just where it was dull. At the end, making it culminate more in the fact that Sarah looks like Gwen and Gabe turns out to be like Norman and turns into a goblin, and they kind of split off in that way. I think there's a really interesting point there where you could use that to say something more about the story and the relationship. I feel like if it was a story that was focusing on the Norman Gwen stuff and the present day consequences of that are these kids, and that you do this thing where they go their own separate ways, and Peter getting a chance to like save Gwen, quote unquote, with her. I think all of that on a symbolic level is really interesting.
The double saving Gwen from Green Goblin thing was pretty fucking good. The like,
Yeah.
as like him diving and trying to save her from falling off the bridge, and he's like, I've asked God a million times to let me do this over, and now's my chance. And he like, you get the full page turn reveal of like, he got her, he saved her, he did it. Was so satisfying. And then there's like that 1-2 punch of, oh no, but I still gotta get her to the hospital.
Yeah.
And you just have that really good scene of the blood transfusion. Really emotionally impactful stuff. I really, really enjoyed that. Like, it felt maybe a little corny when fucking like MJ's like, go get him, Tiger. Like, that felt like a little too much, but I think the art really saved it, of taking that image of Peter and Sarah on the table and transposing the Spidey versus Goblin image above it, and using the blood vessels as like the backdrop. I thought that was really, really cool. And then the fact that like Gabe, all he had to do was be there, and he could have saved his sister. And all he had to do was just let her be okay, and he would have been fine. But like, he's already going crazy. He's already going full Norman. And he's like, you're trying to poison her with your blood. You're trying to take away our blood. Like, that was fucking fantastic. Just how immediately there is no reasoning with him. Like,
Yeah.
part of Osborn's thing as, like, the recording is your mental faculties may go, but it's a fair price to pay. And he accepts it. He just goes with it because he's been so, like, psychologically manipulated and coached and trained by Norman, that like the voice of Norman Osborn is completely unimaginable to disobey for him. So I really, really enjoyed that.
Yeah,
One point you did make about the costumes they show up in, like the tactical SWAT gear kind of thing. I would agree that I don't like that, if not for the fact that we get a better costume by the end of it, so it felt very much like a nice ramp up and setup of that. If it had stayed that the whole story and we never got Grey Goblin, I'd completely agree that it's the most like boring generic thing ever. But like the fact that it leads into the more outlandish costume, I thought was very good and like a natural payoff.
No, I mean that's totally fair. And I mean I say the story in the beginning feels kind of decompressed to me, in part because I feel like the whole sort of like going through the espionage of figuring out what's actually happening is just never interesting to me. But then at the same time, I feel like instead of this being like a 6-issue story, there's enough like material to unpack to make it a full fucking 12-issue story of like the kids growing up and being brainwashed by Norman, about Gave slowly coming in and becoming the Grey Goblin, about all the stuff happening in the past with Gwen and Norman, and about the present day revelations and how Peter is feeling about it. There's actually like a lot of story here, and any one segment of it could have carried the 6-issue arc on its own. And the fact that they're throwing it all at the wall at the same time just means that parts of it that are the most interesting aren't getting explored, and parts of it that could be a lot more interesting don't get a chance to be enhanced by those other elements that are around it. Because like you look at this on paper, right, and it kind of feels like everything has a purpose and everything is going towards a certain end game. Like there's no element of the story that it's introducing, whether it's the Gwen and Norman stuff or the Grey Goblin stuff or the twins or any of it. None of it feels random. None of it feels disjointed. It all feels like all of these are conflicts and characters that belong in this specific story. And if you just had the chance to flesh it out more, honestly, this could be a very, very good Spider-Man story. It's a shame that it's not.
Yeah, again, like the biggest thing is I think no matter what, it would always be controversial because of the Gwen thing. But if that had gotten more time to be fleshed out, it would be at least something you could make an argument for. And that would be the thing that could save it. It's like, it would be controversial, but you could still make an argument. You could still talk about all the good stuff that's happening in it and not just be like, but this fucking garbage happened. And you can't really defend the garbage of the story. The garbage really weighs it down. It is kind of an Achilles heel thing where everything else on this is just hitting so well. And I would trust elements of it more that I'm more dubious about if that like Achilles heel just wasn't there. Mm-hmm. I do want to talk about the art too, because I mentioned the blood transfusion scene, which I thought was just it's the most fucking comic book thing ever, of taking something that's like conceptually dull as fuck to draw and make it just as epic as shit because it just looks so fucking cool. The Grey Goblin design again looks so fantastic. Like the art absolutely pops off in the second half of this story. Super fucking
yeah cool. I love
that
Mike Deodato in the art. He's fantastic.
Yeah, the second half of the story absolutely blows the first half away, but like the first half is still really like nice, solid comic book art, and I like the way that some of the drama and the suspense builds around some of the way that it's like laid out and paneled out. Some that hit me really well early on was the intercepted phone call to Aunt May. The way that's laid out in panels really like takes the suspense of the scene and just ramps it up to 11. Mm-hmm. Because you as the reader know Aunt May is safe, and you're kind of like wondering if you're about to see like the fucking friend is a robot or some very comic booky shit. But just the very simple reveal of the guy walking down the ladder, you know, that was such a good fucking like page turn reveal moment, and I really liked it. And
it's the kind of thing that's like really impactful on a comic in a way it wouldn't be on film, because in film you'd like keep just cutting back and forth between the Peter phone call and the Aunt May being okay, and if you did that on film it would just be funny. But you do it on the comic like that, and suddenly it creates this mystery where you're looking back and forth, and then you get the page reveal that it's a satisfying conclusion. It's a really good layout.
Yeah, and like the thing that impressed me about it, I think the most, is it's like really leaning in on and making sure you have to, like, you're waiting for the dread of a page turn, you know? And I really like that. And then, you know, Peter gets fucking blown up at the end too. That was pretty good. I liked the way that that Sarah just looks like Gwen but doesn't have the... It's very subtle, because you could just argue, well, it's just, you know, the emotions are different. She looks exactly like Gwen, but she doesn't make any of the same facial expressions, if that makes sense. They didn't just draw Gwen Stacy. They made sure to, like... I'm terrible at talking about art, which is why I don't do it. you really get a sense of the different life lived. Even if she looks the exact same as her mom, the different life that she's lived has led her to just have to like wear her resting face differently. The way she makes expressions feels different than the way you see Gwen drawn with similar emotions.
Yeah, she
Because we
doesn't
see
look
Sarah
innocent.
angry. Yeah, we see Sarah angry. We see Gwen angry. They're very different expressions on the face. It's really interesting, like very subtle, but really, really interesting to me.
The only thing about the Sarah looks like Gwen thing that I didn't love is
Headband.
headband, yeah. The headband,
Yep.
I'm just like, that's so lazy.
That's too
Come
much.
on.
Yeah, that one was too much.
That's just so lazy. I mean, come on.
It's funny that it's so simple of like, no, that's not fair. There's no reason that she would also wear a headband. Like unless the Stacys just have like genetic bangs or something that require headband restraint. That's too much.
Yeah, no, that was a bridge too far for me. Cause what's his face? Gabe looks like Peter in a way that's like, oh, I could see this being Peter if I wasn't reading the context.
It just looks like a different artist drawing Peter.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like,
Versus Gwen just
yeah.
looks like this is a little forced.
Yeah, Sarah, right? It's Sarah.
Yeah.
You call her Gwen because it's like it's just too much. It's
well,
that,
I know exactly.
Extra
It's
bit
way
too
too much.
And you see, you know what you could have done with it, right? Because when we get the face reveals when she pulls off the mask or Peter pulls off the mask, right? The way you would have done it, that like it still would have been cheating, but it would have been a more believable cheat, right? Is you just give her like a mask that has kind of like the Batwoman or whatever, where like the hair's out the back. You just give her a mask like that, and then when the mask comes off, you don't have it come all the way off. You just have it stop at the top of her head, right? Like so you mimic the idea of the headband without being so direct about it. So you can get your like satisfying page turn reveal kind of moment, but then it's not like so blatant and obvious that she keeps it on throughout the rest of the fucking book.
Yeah, and especially because the book takes a lot of cues of like recreating pages with Gwen that are classic Gwen pages, and then putting Sarah in the same context. Like she doesn't need the headband in a scene where she's falling off a bridge and Peter is rescuing her, because the implication is there that connects those dots enough. And it's similar in a couple other spots too. Like it feels like when she's having her confrontation with Peter and trying to talk this war down after he figures out what's going on and before Gabe comes in and starts ruining it. By that point, I feel like there's enough of like an artistic excuse to just be like, you're recreating moments that Peter and Gwen have had with each other, except now it's an older Peter and it's Sarah. And I think the reader is savvy enough to understand from the dialogue that they're talking about things related to Gwen, and this character looks suspiciously like her without having to play it over the top. So that was the big thing with me, is I just kind of felt like the headband's a bit cheesy. You didn't really need that. But aside from that, I don't really have a problem with her existence. I am disappointed to hear that while they do come back, they're not characters that seem like are being used to any sort of full potential, because everyone just kind of wants to bury them, which understandable. I understand that impulse. But I don't know. I don't think this is inherently a dead concept.
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned the fact that this has been retconned 7 Ways to Sunday, and I'm sad Alfie had to leave. Because I wanted to know more about that. Because, like, all I know about the retcon is Mysterio did it. And I'm like, okay, so that could make sense in the context of Norman thought he was sleeping with Gwen, but instead it was fucking Mysterio. But, like, how the fuck do you make that work in the fact that, like, Peter dug up Gwen's body and ran her DNA against the twins? So what the fuck is that?
Okay.
How did Mysterio fake DNA results taken years later?
You think this story is convoluted. The retcon is so much more convoluted, because it's not even that simple, okay? It's been a minute since I read it. I'm sure Alfie could give you more details than I could. But essentially what happens is at the end of like a Spider-Man event that Nick Spencer was doing, Norman finds a recording of Harry Osborn who reveals to him that this never actually happened, and that what he did instead is that he and Mysterio and Chameleon got together and hypnotized him into thinking this happened. And then some other dude created genetically rapid aging clones of Gwen and him to simulate the twins. So somehow Harry was like, I want my dad to think that he had sex with Peter's girlfriend so they could create twins who will then murder Peter for some goddamn reason, and then they'll hate each other more, even though that this plan feels like it takes several years of commitment when you probably in that moment could have just fucking shot him or something. I don't know. It's very, very strange. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Takes the whole like, oh no, I will leave you to die in this death trap. But why not just shoot him? Like the second you leave the room, he's gonna fucking kill us. It like takes that whole fucking scene to a new level of like, oh, like we're gonna go to all this trouble. Why don't we just fucking kill the guy?
The fucking robot soap opera on Futurama that Calculi is on. That's how this reads to me. Is it just reads like a plot twist from all my circuits.
Why didn't that get a spin-off comic?
I would
that
watch the
deserves a
shit out
spin-off.
of that. No, and it's not even like it takes place in the same universe or something. No, it's just straight up all my circuits, the TV show.
Oh my fucking god, that'd be so good.
He's so
they
fucking
should do
funny.
that SNF. Like in a post Rick and Morty world where you could just do like fucking interdimensional cable as a like episode pitch, they should just do that as a new episode of Futurama. Just a full episode that's just all my circuits. That'd be fucking fantastic.
It'd be so funny. Alright, so one last thing I wanted to mention about controversial comics since past and all that jazz is JMS is actually a very good writer. I don't know if we've stressed this enough, but JMS is actually a very good writer. And
he's hit and miss for me. I don't know. It's weird. I think I've only read the bad JMS stuff.
I see.
Because
you didn't
I
watch
read
Babylon 5, did you?
No, he did. Because he did the Wonder Woman and Superman book right at the end of Old 52, right? We're thinking of the same guy here.
He did Brave
Superman
and the
Grounded.
Bold. He did do he did do the ongoing Superman and the ongoing Wonder Woman. Yeah. Grounded.
Yeah. Okay, so I read the Wonder Woman and I started reading the Superman until he left it.
Yeah.
The Wonder Woman was terrible. The Superman was okay, but unfinished story. I've read his Earth 1 and I've honestly like flip-flopped on how I feel about it. I've read this. I'm trying to think of what other JMS stuff I've read. Because I keep just hearing people tell me he's good, and then I read like stuff that is like this, where it's like, well, it's got good elements in it, but then it's also not great. It's like everything I read from him seems to have some kind of like fundamental flaw, if not just straight bad.
Well, okay, so first
is
of
a
all, your
weird thing I
entire
have with it.
experience, not just your opinion, your entire experience is invalid because he wrote Ninja Assassin, and that's the greatest movie of all time. So
Oh, fair. You're right. Never mind. I love Ninja Assassin. Greatest movie of all time.
No, he did Ninja Assassin.
Wait. Sorry, Steve. Sorry. I need to interrupt and ask a very important question that is going to derail the conversation for at least 20 minutes. Okay. Who would win in a fight? Dude from Ninja Assassin or dude from Kung Pao and Earth the Fist?
I gotta give it to guy from Kung Pao, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I think he's got too much of like the toon physics to be stopped by a gritty ninja, you know?
It's like kind of the opposite sides of ultra-violence on television, isn't it? Or on screen.
Yeah, a little bit where it's like there's a lot of blood and gore, but that doesn't matter for Kung Pao. So how does that work?
I mean, I just really want to see him like fucking hit the guy in the chest and be like just like one clean shot.
But
Sorry,
to get back here, JMS is actually a very, very good writer. I like Superman Earth 1, which is weird because I don't like Man of Steel, and those are similar takes. But he did...
It's literally the exact same book.
But I like one and not the other. He did Silver Surfer Requiem, which for a lot of people is like the best Silver Surfer story. I love his Thor run up until the end where he leaves... I love the early stuff he does on his Spider-Man run, and then I like some of the later arcs that come between this and Sin's Past. It's been a while since I've read that later stuff, but the original stuff he does with like the spider totem and stuff is really good, and he's kind of the quintessential place to start with Spider-Man for a lot of people because it gives you a good stepping stone for all of the historical context and more of what the modern stuff is. Even today, 20 years later, it feels like the best place to start with modern Spider-Man is just JMS, even before you get to like your fucking Dan Slotts or whatever. So I like JMS. I think he's a good writer. Babylon 5 is like a classic sci-fi TV show up there with like Star Trek and shit. So like I think he's very talented, and even in a story like this that like doesn't work all the way, and where I feel like he makes a lot of creative choices that are not smart and don't go with his instincts, he sells it the best he can in certain places. And like Alfie said earlier, I love his voice for Peter. I think his voice for adult Peter is like the best adult Peter ever. I don't think anyone has really like kind of captured that. He's a guy who is both aging out of this younger teenage characterization we throw him all the time in, but someone who hasn't had the ability to emotionally mature because his mentality has been so stunted by all the trauma he suffered. And so he's going back and forth between like regressing to a crying child over a lot of it and trying to be a responsible adult on the other end. I feel like he straddles that line really, really well. And even in this story, I feel like all of Peter's reactions to stuff, they feel like reasoned and thoughtful and natural, and when he needs to get emotional, it kind of hits.
I guess I'd push back a little bit. I don't love his characterization for Peter. I think it's like, I think his character. Let me rephrase it. I think his characterization is good. I don't love his voice for Peter. Peter doesn't really feel like quite where I just like my Peter Parker to be. So this may just be like personal taste thing. But it just didn't quite like go anywhere for me. I just kept like hearing, or just seeing the way he was writing him, and I'm like, it just doesn't feel like it's quite hitting for me. Particularly with like his jokes. I didn't like crack a smile, I think, and none of the jokes or quips like actually sat with me for any time. And this just might be that like this book, Peter's in a very different place, and so it's not a very representative thing of the like voice he has for Peter on the whole. But just using this to go off of strictly just the way he wrote Peter, I always like a really jokey Spider-Man. My thing with Peter Parker is I always think that until he gets superpowers, his mouth should write checks, his ass cannot cash. And just like he always like the reason Peter gets bullied is because he's just able to like come up with just an absolutely devastating fucking quip and leaves the person in no place but to prove themselves by beating the shit out of him. And then when he gets superpowers, now he can hit back, and so he's just a fucking triple threat kind of thing. And you know that's why I relate to Peter Parker, because I very much have that in me. And so I just none of his quips just really hit for me, and so that was kind of the thing that like landed the flattest for me. I also didn't love the relationship with MJ. A lot of it just felt like she was way too good to him. I know it might not be the best look to just go, the bitch died fucking 10 years ago, get over it, I'm your wife now, fucking goddamn. But at the same time, like, legit, she should have said that, because he was just too ridiculously still into Gwen in a way that just... I know Peter Parker isn't necessarily supposed to be, like, the guy to look to for, you know, emotional maturity, but it just felt like too much, like unbelievable that someone could actually live with these kind of emotions. So I didn't love it. I didn't hate it a lot. Like, I think at best it fell flat for me, and at worst I was like, he's just not funny enough. It's kind of
something that I understand where you're coming from there. Something about his Peter that I think really resonates with me is I read a lot of this stuff when I was a lot younger, and I always make the joke that I feel like my sense of humor is somewhere between a Joss Whedon TV show and Bugs Bunny, and the way that there's this kind of combined constant bit of sarcasm that's just really dry and is funny in how unfunny it is just kind of my sense of humor, and it's a thing that I do a lot. And so when Peter in this is just saying stupid shit that's meant to be funny but is not particularly funny, I'm like, yeah, that's a guy in his late 20s, early 30s trying to lighten the mood. I relate to that vibe. So I kind of dig that about him.
That's fair. That's fair. I don't know. It was something else kind of fucking reading through that because just none of it hit. I was actually quite proud of myself for someone I was making fun of today, because there's this girl at work and she and I like to, within fun, go back and forth at each other a little bit, and I said something to her and it wasn't like a particularly good one. But she had her headphones in, and another girl that was there was like, "Oh, she can't hear you. She's listening to her country music." And she like took her headphones off at that point to listen. I was like, "Don't say that. Don't spread rumors like that about someone. That could like ruin their life." I just fucking kept going with it, and just like, she goes, "Ian, shut the fuck up." It's just like you need like that kind of reaction, at least for me, for Peter. Just like I would hit you if I could right now, and with supervillains they can, and that's just the right fucking vibe to be in for Peter. And it's just really funny.
No,
Sorry, I was really proud of that today. I was quite pleased with myself because it's just such like a fucking you son of a, what do I say to that? Because I am listening to country music. You fuck.
That's pretty fucking good, honestly.
Thank you. I'm hilarious. The other day at work, I was someone was rushing me outside. And I was like, "All right, listen, I need you to take those reins and grip them a little bit tighter." And they look at me like, "What?" And I go, "Because you need to hold your horses." And they're like, just fucking roll their eyes at me. I'm like, "You're so lucky to work with the funniest person on earth. I'm so jealous of you." I'm obnoxious at times, and I love myself for it.
Honestly, that's pretty fucking great. I love that.
Thank you.
Oh my god.
Anyway, do we have anything else to say about this book?
One thing I will say at the end here is, compared to the book we're going to talk about next and other books we could have chosen, like Avengers 197 or the book you guys talked about last week, I don't feel like the controversial bad thing that this book is known for is in and of itself defensible as a position that says this is a terrible comic and this is one of the worst things to ever happen at Marvel or some shit like that. I really legitimately, after having read it, don't think you can make that case, because it's really not that bad. It's not a good story. The choice is definitely not handled with care, but I don't think this is anywhere in the same league as, like, Captain Marvel getting raped, or Hal having sex with a 13-year-old, or Superman and Big Barda being brainwashed into making pornos. Like, this is nowhere near that level of unhinged.
That's fair. Okay, Steve, so what book are we going to talk about next time that involves a grown-ass man having sex with a teenager? No, we're not continuing on that theme? Is that not going to be the theme of Geeky Gentleman this week?
If you wanted that, I could actually change my pick, but no.
It was just kind of funny, like, in retrospect that Alvy picked that, because it's like, it fits the theme of Infamous, but it was really funny. It's like, oh, one of these things is not like the other.
Geeky Gentleman Non-Consensual Sex Month.
Geeky Gentleman Statutory Rape Month. Let's
Hey,
go!
Let's go.
Oh my goodness.
Alright, so next time, we will have much less nuanced and interesting things to say, I imagine. It is just going to be a lot more jokey jokes to lighten the mood. But next time, I want to talk about Action Comics 592 to 593, a 2-issue story arc done by John Byrne in the 90s?
Jesus fucking
or
Christ.
80s? Yeah, in the 1980s. Where a supervillain kidnaps Big Barda and Superman and makes them film pornos.
I really like back when Mr. Miracle was publishing, and that like really famous image of Scott like screaming on the cover was going around, and someone just put that like in the background of one of the panels of Barda and Superman. I'm gonna see if I can find that for the thumbnail for next week, because that was a good one.
I think you're gonna I think you're gonna find a lot of good reaction fodder from Mr. Miracle in 593.
Yeah, let's go. All right, everyone, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
And I am the champion of the oppressed now, bitch. Huh?
Ah, got him. And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.